The salt-kissed air rushed through Aurelia's open car window as she navigated the winding coastal road. 7 years away, and still her body remembered every curve of this drive. How to lean into the sharp turn before the lighthouse, when to slow for the dip near the old marina. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel as the Dorne estate came into view, perched on the cliffside like a sentinel watching the restless sea below. She hadn't planned to return to Seabrook. Not after her mother's funeral 3 years ago, when she'd packed whatever remained of their modest life and fled to the anonymity of the city. But life had a cruel way of bringing you full circle, of pushing you back to the very places you tried to escape. Aurelia pulled over at the scenic overlook, killing the engine. The late afternoon sun painted the water in shimmering gold, the same view that had witnessed her childhood dreams, teenage heartbreaks, and eventually, her desperate departure. She pulled out her phone, checking the message from Elowen again. "I know it's been forever, but Dad's opening the summer house early this year. Please come. I need you here. Just for a few weeks." What Elowen didn't know, couldn't know, was that Aurelia had nowhere else to go. The design firm she'd poured herself into had collapsed under embezzlement charges against her partner. Her apartment lease had ended. Her engagement had shattered when she discovered the ring was meant for someone else. She was 32, starting over, with nothing but a car full of belongings and a best friend offering temporary sanctuary. Aurelia closed her eyes, feeling the wind tangle her dark hair. When she opened them, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her mother's eyes staring back at her. Those same eyes that would cloud with something unnameable whenever the Dorne family was mentioned. "It's just for a few weeks," she whispered to herself, ignoring the strange flutter in her chest, the one that felt oddly like premonition. What could possibly happen in a few weeks? My beautiful listener, where are you watching from today? Perhaps by a window with rain tapping against glass, or curled up in bed with memories of your own homecomings. If this story has already whispered to something deep inside you, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to me. My dear beautiful soul, have you ever returned to a place only to find your heart recognizing something, or someone it wasn't supposed to? Share your story in the comments below. I'm here reading every word you write. The Dorne estate's wrought iron gates parted with a familiar creak. Aurelia's modest sedan looked painfully out of place as it crunched up the shell-lined driveway, past manicured gardens that had featured in architectural magazines. Before she could even park, the massive front door flew open. "Lia!" Elowen's voice carried across the courtyard, unchanged by time. Still musical, still slightly too loud for her petite frame. Aurelia barely had time to step out before being enveloped in a fierce embrace, the scent of Elowen's signature jasmine perfume bringing back a flood of shared memories. Midnight swims, stolen wine, whispered secrets. "Let me look at you," Elowen said, pulling back, her hands still gripping Aurelia's shoulders. At 31, Elowen Dorne remained effortlessly elegant. Honey blonde hair swept into a casual knot, designer sundress that probably cost more than Aurelia's monthly rent, eyes the exact shade of the ocean behind them. "City life suits you." "Liar," Aurelia laughed, suddenly conscious of her travel-worn appearance. "I look like I've been driving for 6 hours." "You look real," Elowen countered, linking their arms as she led Aurelia toward the house. "Everyone here is so polished. It's exhausting." The grand foyer welcomed them with soaring ceilings and the distinctive scent of lemon oil and old money. Aurelia had spent countless summers here as a teenager, yet it still intimidated her. The casual display of wealth in every antique, every carefully curated object. "Dad's expanded the library," Elowen said, her tone shifting subtly. "It's practically taken over the East Wing now. He spends most of his time there." "Still writing?" Aurelia asked, remembering Mr. Dorne's reputation as a reclusive novelist. Something flickered across Elowen's face. A shadow there and gone. "Always writing. Never publishing. Not since Mom died." Aurelia squeezed her friend's arm. Marianne Dorne had passed away when they were in college. A sudden aneurysm that left Callan Dorne a widower at 42 and Elowen motherless at 20. "He's different now," Elowen continued, leading them up the grand staircase. Quieter, more distant. Sometimes I think he forgets I'm even here. She paused at the landing, turning to Aurelia with an intensity that was startling. That's why I needed you to come. This house is too full of ghosts when it's just the two of us. Aurelia nodded, though something in Elowen's words unsettled her. There was a desperation there, a plea that went beyond simple loneliness. I've put you in the blue room, Elowen continued, brightening artificially. Same one you always had during summer breaks. I thought it might make you feel at home. As they reached the top of the stairs, Elowen's phone chimed. She glanced at it, frowning. The caterers for Saturday's charity event are having a crisis. I need to take this. She squeezed Aurelia's hand. Get settled. Dinner's at 7. Dad might even make an appearance. The way she said it, like her father's presence at his own dinner table was an uncertain gift, told Aurelia more about the Dorne family dynamics than any explicit explanation could have. Aurelia unpacked methodically, hanging her modest wardrobe in the cavernous closet where it occupied barely a quarter of the available space. The blue room overlooked the western gardens and, beyond them, the endless expanse of ocean. She'd always loved this view, how it made her feel simultaneously insignificant and infinite. A shower and change of clothes later, she found herself drawn to the library. Muscle memory guided her through the winding corridors of the East Wing, past priceless artwork and family photographs where Elowen's growth was documented in careful yearly portraits. The library doors stood partially open, warm light spilling into the hallway. Aurelia hesitated, then gently pushed one door wider, intending only to peek at the expanded space Elowen had mentioned. Either come in or close the door. The draft disturbs the pages. The deep voice startled her. Callan Dorne sat at a massive desk by the windows, backlit by the setting sun so that his face remained in shadow. Embarrassed at being caught, Aurelia stepped fully into the room. I'm sorry, I was just... Aurelia! He said her name with quiet recognition, rising from his chair. As he stepped into the light, Aurelia felt something shift in the atmosphere, a subtle charge like the air before a storm. Callan Dorne had aged, yes, but not in the way most men did. At 52, he'd grown more into himself, silver threading elegantly through his dark hair, lines at his eyes speaking of both laughter and loss. He wore simple dark trousers and a white shirt with rolled sleeves, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle. This was not the distant, formal Mr. Dorne she remembered from her youth. This was someone altogether more human, more present. Mr. Dorne, she managed, hating how young she suddenly felt. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Callan, he corrected, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. After all these years, I think we can dispense with formalities. He gestured to the room around them. What do you think of my literary obsession? Elowen calls it my midlife crisis. The library had indeed transformed. What was once a formal, traditional space had expanded into a personal sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, interspersed with comfortable reading nooks. The 4th wall was almost entirely glass, offering a panoramic view of the churning ocean below. It's beautiful, she said honestly. Like something from a dream. Something flickered in his expression, surprise perhaps at her sincerity. Your mother had a similar appreciation for beautiful spaces. She could see the potential in things others overlooked. The mention of her mother caught Aurelia off guard. In all the summers she'd spent here, Callan Dorne had rarely mentioned Solène. That he would do so now, within minutes of seeing Aurelia again, felt significant in ways she couldn't articulate. You knew her well? She asked, moving deeper into the room, drawn by curiosity. His gaze held hers for a beat too long. Once. A lifetime ago. He turned away abruptly, moving to close an open manuscript on his desk. Elowen mentioned you've become quite successful in interior design. The sudden change of subject was jarring, but Aurelia followed his lead. The firm collapsed last month. Partner fraud. I'm sorry to hear that. When he looked at her again, something had shifted in his demeanor, a wall carefully reconstructed. Perhaps everything happens for a reason. Elowen has missed you terribly. Before Aurelia could respond, the library door swung open wider. There you are, Elowen exclaimed, looking between them with curious eyes. I see you two have reacquainted yourselves. Just now, Callan said, his voice returning to the polite distance Aurelia remembered. If you'll excuse me, I have some calls to make before dinner. As he passed Aurelia, their shoulders nearly brushed. She caught a hint of his scent, sandalwood and something uniquely his, and felt an unexpected shiver trace her spine. Elowen linked arms with her again, leading her from the library. Dad has that effect on everyone these days, she said lightly. Starts conversations, then remembers he's supposed to be the brooding recluse and retreats. But Aurelia couldn't shake the feeling that his retreat had nothing to do with being a recluse and everything to do with her. Dinner that evening was served in the smaller family dining room rather than the formal one Aurelia remembered from larger gatherings. Crystal glasses caught the light from the antique chandelier, casting prism patterns across the white tablecloth. Through the windows, the last colors of sunset bled into the darkening sky. Callan sat at the head of the table, Elowen and Aurelia on either side. The conversation flowed more easily than Aurelia had expected, centered mostly on neutral topics. Local changes in Seabrook, mutual acquaintances, the charity event Elowen was organizing for the weekend. It's for the Children's Hospital in Portland, Elowen explained, gesturing with her wine glass. Dad's donating signed first editions of his entire collection. They'll auction for thousands each. That's very generous, Aurelia said, glancing at Callan. He shrugged, the gesture oddly humble. Books should be read, not locked away. If their sale can help children, all the better. Dad's being modest, Elowen continued. He's also anonymously funding the new pediatric wing. $8 million. Elowen. His voice carried a gentle warning. What? Aurelia's practically family. And it's not like she's going to tell the press. The phrase practically family hung in the air, carrying unexpected weight. Aurelia took a sip of wine to fill the sudden silence. Speaking of family, Elowen pivoted smoothly. How's your father, Leah? Still in Arizona. New Mexico now. Remarried last year to a woman he met on a hiking tour. They're happy. And you never visit? Callan asked, his question direct but his tone gentle. Aurelia met his gaze. We're not close. After Mom died, he reinvented himself. I didn't fit into the new narrative. Something like recognition flickered in Callan's eyes. Some men don't know how to carry grief and connection simultaneously. We're not taught how. The insight surprised her, both its perception and the implied self-awareness. Well, Elowen said brightly, clearly trying to lighten the mood, you're stuck with us now. At least until you figure out your next move. She turned to her father. Leah's between jobs. Her design firm imploded. So I heard, Callan said. Actually, I've been considering renovating this wing of the house. The library expansion has left adjacent spaces disconnected. He looked directly at Aurelia. Perhaps you'd consider consulting while you're here. Paid, of course. The offer caught her off guard. I couldn't possibly. Please, he interrupted. It would be a favor to me. This house needs a fresh perspective. Before Aurelia could respond, Elowen clapped her hands together. That's perfect. You're brilliant at seeing potential in spaces, Leah. And it gives you a reason to stay longer. Trapped between them, Aurelia found herself nodding. I suppose I could look at the spaces at least. Excellent, Callan said, a small smile softening his features. We can begin tomorrow. As the housekeeper cleared their plates and brought dessert, Aurelia felt the subtle shift in dynamics. What had begun as a temporary refuge was transforming into something more complicated. She would be working directly with Callan, spending hours in his company, while living under his roof. Later, as Elowen walked her back to the blue room, her friend looped an arm through hers. "Thank you for saying yes. Dad needs distraction, connection, something beyond his manuscripts and memories." "I'm happy to help," Aurelia said carefully. "But I'm not sure I'm the right person for either of those things." Elowen stopped outside Aurelia's door, her expression suddenly serious. "You've always been exactly what this family needed, Leah. Even if none of us realized it until now." The words followed Aurelia into sleep that night, mingling with dreams of ocean waves, unsent letters, and dark eyes that seemed to recognize something in her that she didn't yet understand herself. Morning light streamed through the library's eastern windows as Aurelia surveyed the adjacent rooms with a designer's eye. The expansion had indeed created awkward transitions. A former sitting room now served as an uncomfortable passage, while a small study had been rendered nearly purposeless, caught between the library and the main hallway. "The flow is completely disrupted," she murmured, making notes on her tablet. "These spaces need to either be incorporated into the library or given new purpose entirely." Callan leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. He dressed casually again, dark jeans and a grey Henley that softened his usual formality. "What do you see that I don't?" Aurelia moved to the center of the sitting room, turning slowly. "This space wants to be part of the library, but it's fighting against its original purpose. See how the light changes here." She gestured to where the warm glow from the library met the cooler light of the sitting room. "It's like two different worlds colliding." Something in her words made Callan straighten, his expression shifting. "And how do you reconcile two worlds that were never meant to merge?" The question felt weighted with meaning beyond architecture. Aurelia met his gaze directly. "You create a transition that honors both. A threshold that acknowledges the crossing." For several heartbeats, neither spoke. Then Callan nodded, as if she'd passed some unspoken test. "Show me what that looks like." Over the next 3 days, Aurelia immersed herself in the project. She created digital renderings that transformed the awkward spaces into natural extensions of the library. The sitting room reimagined as a music alcove with built-in shelving for Callan's vinyl collection, the small study converted to a writing nook with a window seat overlooking the gardens. Callan approved her designs without hesitation, arranging for local craftsmen to begin work immediately. What surprised Aurelia was his insistence on participating in the renovation himself. "I built the original library shelves," he explained, rolling up his sleeves as they prepared to empty the sitting room. "I should have a hand in their extension." They worked in tandem, emptying rooms of furniture, carefully cataloging books and artifacts that would need new homes in the redesigned spaces. Elowen occasionally drifted through, offering commentary or bringing refreshments, but mostly leaving them to their work, something Aurelia noticed with growing awareness. By the 4th day, they'd established a rhythm, moving around each other with the unconscious coordination of dancers who've practiced the same routine for years. When their hands occasionally brushed passing tools or books, Aurelia found herself increasingly aware of the contact, brief touches that lingered in her consciousness long after they'd ended. "You're good at this," Callan observed late one afternoon as they finished priming the walls of what would become the music alcove. A smudge of white paint marked his forearm, humanizing him in a way his perfect prose never could. Seeing beneath the surface of things. Aurelia smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "That's the job. Looking past what is to what could be. Is that what drew you to design? The possibility of transformation?" She considered his question, realizing no one had ever asked her that before. "Partly. But also creating spaces where people feel both safe and inspired. My mother and I moved so often when I was young. I never had a room that felt truly mine until I was 16. Callan's expression softened. "So Len always wanted to give you stability." She spoke of it often. The casual mention of conversations with her mother caught Aurelia off guard again. "You knew her well enough for those kinds of conversations." Something flickered in his eyes. Caution, perhaps. We all spent summers in Seabrook. The community was smaller then. It wasn't a real answer, and they both knew it. But before Aurelia could press further, the contractor arrived with samples for the built-in shelving, and the moment slipped away. Another piece in a puzzle she was only beginning to recognize. The renovation created a strange intimacy between them. Physical labor had a way of breaking down barriers that polite conversation maintained. By the end of the first week, they'd fallen into the habit of working late into the evening after the contractors left, sharing wine as they discussed the next day's plans. "Why did you stop publishing?" Aurelia asked one night as they sat on drop cloths spread across the library floor, takeout containers between them. The question had been building for days. Callan's hand stilled, wine glass halfway to his lips. For a moment, she thought he might deflect again, but instead he set the glass down carefully. "Writing was always private for me. Publishing was Marianne's idea. She believed stories should be shared." His voice carried no bitterness, only a quiet resignation. "After she died, the public part felt hollow. But you still write. More than ever." A rueful smile touched his lips. "Words are poor company, but reliable ones." Aurelia drew her knees to her chest, studying him. "My mother used to say that creativity was how we speak to the parts of ourselves we're afraid to face directly." Something shifted in Callan's expression, a recognition that seemed almost painful. So Len always had insight beyond her years. He hesitated, then asked, "What do you remember of her? Not the facts, but the feeling." The question opened something in Aurelia's chest, a door she usually kept firmly closed. She was like water, flowing, adapting, but with currents underneath you couldn't always see. She'd be laughing one moment, then I'd catch her staring at the horizon with such longing it scared me. She traced a pattern in the dust beside her. After Dad left, those moments came more often. Like she was looking for something she'd lost long before him. Callan's breathing had gone shallow, his eyes never leaving her face. "And you? What did you lose when she died?" "My witness," Aurelia answered without hesitation, surprising herself with the truth of it. "The only person who knew all the versions of me, from beginning to end." "That's what children are to parents," Callan said softly. "But parents are something else to children. They're our first understanding of love, flawed, human, but defining." "Is that how it is with you and Elowen?" Pain flickered across his features. "I failed her in ways I can never repair. After Marianne died, I retreated. Elowen needed presence, but I could only offer provision." The raw honesty of his admission created a bridge between them. Two people who understood loss not as an event but as a companion that walks beside you, reshaping every step that follows. "It's never too late," Aurelia said gently, "to be present." Callan looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing past the surface to something essential. "Some absences can't be undone, Aurelia. Some mistakes leave permanent marks." The weight of his words hung between them, carrying meaning she couldn't fully grasp but somehow recognized in her bones. The contractors needed 3 days to custom build the shelving for the music alcove, creating an unexpected pause in the renovation. Aurelia used the time to catalog Callan's extensive book collection, creating a digital system that would help reorganize the volumes once the new spaces were complete. She worked methodically through the existing shelves, scanning barcodes with a tablet app, occasionally pausing to examine first editions or unusual finds. Callan had gone into Portland for meetings with his publisher, a rare venture into the outside world that Elowen had practically pushed him into. "He needs to remember there's life beyond these walls," Elowen had said that morning, giving Aurelia a conspiratorial wink. "And I need to finalize the charity event details. You'll be okay alone with the books." Now, reaching the bottom shelf of a particularly dusty section, Aurelia's hand brushed against something that didn't feel like a book. Crouching lower, she discovered a thin wooden box pushed against the wall, nearly invisible in the shadows. Curiosity overcame propriety. She slid the box forward and carefully lifted the hinged lid. Inside lay a manuscript, not bound, but neatly stacked pages held together with twine. No title page, just a dedication. For S, who taught me that some loves exist outside of time. Forgive me. The handwriting was unmistakably Callan's, the same elegant script she'd seen on his renovation notes. Heart beating faster, Aurelia lifted the manuscript from its hiding place. She knew she should return it, that reading someone's unpublished work was an invasion of privacy. Yet something about the dedication, about the careful preservation of these pages, called to her. She carried the manuscript to the window seat, telling herself she would just read the first page, just enough to understand what kind of story Callan had hidden away. The first paragraph stopped her breath. She came to the coast that summer with nothing but a sketchbook and secrets. I watched her from my family's house on the cliff, this girl who walked the beach at impossible hours, who seemed to be looking for something in the waves that no one else could see. I was 25, home from graduate school. Already trapped in expectations I lacked the courage to refuse. She was 20, wild and wounded and wiser than anyone I'd ever known. Neither of us was prepared for what would happen when our worlds collided. Hours disappeared as Aurelia read, completely absorbed in the story of Thomas, the reluctant heir to a shipping fortune, and Elaine, the artist who came to the coastal town fleeing an unnamed past. Their love affair unfolded against the backdrop of a summer in a town that could only be Seabrook, though Callan had changed the name. It was exquisitely written, raw, honest, and heartbreaking. Thomas and Elaine's connection transcended physical attraction, becoming something almost spiritual in its intensity. But forces conspired against them. Family obligations, social expectations, and ultimately, a betrayal engineered by Thomas's father that separated them forever. So engrossed was Aurelia in the final chapters that she didn't hear the library door open. Only when a shadow fell across the page did she look up, startled to find Callan standing before her. His expression unreadable. She began, but words failed her. There was no excuse for what she'd done. Callan's gaze moved from her face to the manuscript in her hands, his jaw tightening. For a terrible moment, Aurelia thought he might demand she leave, both the library and his home. Instead, he asked quietly, "How much have you read?" "All of it," she admitted, unable to lie. "I'm sorry. I found it and I couldn't stop." He moved to the window, looking out at the ocean, his back to her. The silence stretched between them, taut with unspoken things. "What did you think?" he finally asked, still not turning. The question surprised her. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "Devastating but beautiful. The way you captured their connection. How it existed outside of circumstance, almost outside of time itself." She hesitated, then added, "It doesn't feel like fiction." At that, he did turn, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "The best fiction never does." "Elaine reminds me of my mother," Aurelia said softly, running her fingers over the manuscript's final page. "Not just the artistic talent, but the way she sees the world, finding beauty in broken things, feeling everything so deeply." Callan remained by the window, his posture rigid. "Many women share those qualities. Not like this." Aurelia shook her head. The scene where she shows Thomas her sketches of the abandoned lighthouse, how she captured not what it was, but what it had meant to generations of sailors. "My mother had a photograph series exactly like that. Sentinels, she called it." Something flickered in Callan's eyes. Alarm, perhaps, or recognition. Creative minds often follow similar paths. "And the locket Elaine always wore. With the pressed forget-me-not inside." Aurelia pressed on, following an instinct she couldn't explain. "My mother had one just like it. I found it after she died, though I'd never seen her wear it." Callan turned fully toward her now, his expression carefully controlled. "What are you asking, Aurelia?" "I'm not sure," she admitted. "But this story feels like more than fiction. It feels like memory." He moved closer, sitting beside her on the window seat, close enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, smell the sandalwood scent that had become familiar over their days working together. "All writing contains pieces of the writer," he said carefully. "We cannibalize our experiences, transform them into something new. But some experiences leave larger pieces than others," Aurelia countered gently. "This love story. It's the most honest thing I've ever read. Thomas and Elaine feel real in a way most characters don't." Callan's gaze dropped to the manuscript between them. "What would you change about it, as a reader?" The question surprised her, shifting their conversation to safer ground. She considered carefully. The ending feels unfinished, not just because they're separated, but because we never learn if Thomas fights for her. If he chooses love over obligation. Perhaps he couldn't. "Everyone can choose," Aurelia said firmly. "Even if the choice comes with consequences." Callan looked at her, then really looked at her as if seeing something new. "Would you help me revise it?" The ending. The request hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond literary critique. Aurelia knew she should refuse, that the boundaries between them were already blurring dangerously. Yet she found herself nodding. "I'd be honored." Beautiful soul. Are you still with me? Whether you're listening in the soft glow of evening or the quiet hours before dawn, I feel you there. Have you ever found yourself drawn to someone through the words they've written? Someone whose soul spoke to yours through ink and paper? If this story is touching your heart, please like and share it with someone who understands forbidden feelings. I read every comment. Tell me about a time when someone's art revealed their true self to you. Let's remind the algorithm that stories of real connection still matter. They established a new routine. Days spent on the physical renovation, evenings dedicated to the manuscript. Callan brought out his laptop, opening the digital version of the story, allowing Aurelia to see his process as he revised scenes based on their discussions. What began as literary analysis gradually shifted into something more personal. Each conversation about Thomas and Elaine's motivations revealed layers of Callan and Aurelia's own beliefs about love, sacrifice, and redemption. "Do you think some connections are fated?" Aurelia asked one evening as they sat in the newly completed music alcove, the manuscript open between them. "That some people are meant to find each other, regardless of circumstance." Callan's fingers stilled on the keyboard. "I think," he began carefully, "that recognition exists. Souls that somehow know each other, even in first meetings. Like Thomas and Elaine on the beach." "Yes." His eyes met hers, holding for a beat too long. "Like that." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something neither was ready to name. Aurelia looked away first, heart racing with the dangerous recognition that the manuscript wasn't the only thing being revised in these twilight hours. The charity event transformed the Dorne estate for a weekend, filling it with Portland's elite, their polite laughter echoing through rooms usually shrouded in silence. Aurelia watched from the periphery as Callan performed the role of gracious host with practiced ease, though she caught the occasional tightness around his eyes when conversations lingered too long. Elowen shone in her element, effortlessly charming donors and coordinating staff. The event raised over $2 million for the Children's Hospital, a success by any measure. By Sunday evening, the last guests had departed, leaving the three of them alone again in the suddenly too quiet house. Elowen, exhausted from her hosting duties, retired early, leaving Aurelia and Callan to their renovation plans. "I've never understood how she does it," Callan remarked as they sat in the library, architectural drawings spread between them, a bottle of aged Bordeaux open on the side table. "Finding energy in crowds when they only deplete me. She's like her mother that way," Aurelia observed, accepting the glass he offered. "You've mentioned that before." Callan nodded, settling into the leather chair opposite hers. The fire he'd built earlier cast dancing shadows across his features, softening the angles of his face. Marianne could charm anyone. It was her gift, making people feel seen. "But not you?" Aurelia asked, sensing the undercurrent in his words. He studied his wine, swirling it gently. She saw the man she wanted me to be, not always the one I was. The admission hung between them, intimate in its honesty. Aurelia found herself sharing in return. My father was the same with my mother. He loved the idea of her, the beautiful artist with her head in the clouds. But the reality of her, the moods, the melancholy, the memories she never shared, that was too complicated for him. Some people can only love what they understand, Callan said softly. The truly rare ones love despite the mystery. Is that what you're writing about? In the revised ending. His eyes met hers over the rim of his glass. I'm writing about courage. The kind I wish I'd had when it mattered. It's never too late for courage, Aurelia said, echoing their earlier conversation about presence. Isn't it? Callan set his glass down, leaning forward. Some choices, once made, create irreversible consequences. Paths that can never be uncrossed. But new paths can always be forged, she countered. Different ones. Something shifted in his expression. A softening, a surrender to possibility. That's what I'm counting on. The conversation drifted then, flowing from literature to philosophy, from architecture to art. Hours dissolved as they discovered shared passions and complementary perspectives. The wine loosened their usual restraint, allowing laughter to emerge more freely, gestures to become more animated. It was well past midnight when Aurelia finally stood to leave, slightly unsteady from the wine and the intensity of their connection. Callan rose as well, moving to escort her to the door. Thank you, he said quietly as they paused at the library threshold. For what? For seeing the man I am, not just the one I present. His voice had dropped lower, intimate in the darkened hallway. Aurelia looked up at him, suddenly aware of their proximity, of the subtle scent of him, of the way the shadows accentuated the strong line of his jaw. Thank you for letting me see him. For a breathless moment, neither moved. Then Callan stepped back slightly, breaking the spell. Good night, Aurelia. She nodded, turning toward her room, feeling his gaze follow her until she rounded the corner. Only then did she release the breath she'd been holding, her heart racing with the recognition of how dangerously close they'd come to crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. You two have become quite the renovation team, Elowen remarked the following afternoon, joining Aurelia in the garden where she was sketching ideas for new window treatments. Her tone was casual, but her eyes were watchful. Aurelia kept her focus on her drawing. The project's coming along well. Your father has good instincts for design. Elowen settled beside her on the stone bench. I noticed the light in the library was on until nearly 2 last night. Heat crept up Aurelia's neck. We lost track of time discussing the built-ins for the writing nook. Built-ins, of course. Elowen's laugh held an edge. You know, I've never seen him like this. Engaged, present. He actually asked about my foundation work this morning. He hasn't done that in years. Aurelia finally looked up, meeting her friend's gaze. Isn't that a good thing? It's unexpected. Elowen studied her for a long moment. He looks at you differently than he looks at anyone else. Did you know that? Elowen, I'm not accusing you of anything, she interrupted, her expression softening. I'm just observing. Whatever you're doing, the renovation, the conversations, whatever it is, it's waking him up. I haven't seen him this alive since before Mom died. Relief mingled with guilt in Aurelia's chest. We're just working together. And talking. That's all. Elowen patted her hand, rising from the bench. Just be careful, Leah. Dad's complicated. There are things about him, about our family, that even I don't fully understand. She paused, then added more lightly. Besides, I'd hate to lose my best friend to my father. How cliché would that be? She walked away before Aurelia could respond, leaving her with the uncomfortable awareness that their connection hadn't gone unnoticed, and the even more uncomfortable realization that she wasn't sure what that connection was becoming. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday evening. They'd been working for hours on the revised ending of the manuscript, Callan struggling to find Thomas's voice in the crucial scene where he must decide whether to follow Elaine or remain trapped in his family's expectations. "It's not working," Callan said, frustration evident as he pushed away from his desk. "The words are hollow." Aurelia moved to stand behind him, reading over his shoulder. "Because you're writing what you think should happen, not what would happen." "And what would happen?" He looked up at her, challenge in his eyes. "He would go after her," Aurelia said without hesitation. "Not because it's the right choice, but because it's the only choice. Because a life without her isn't really living. It's just existing." Something shifted in Callan's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or surrender. "Show me," he said quietly, rising from his chair to let her take his place. Aurelia sat, fingers hovering over the keyboard for a moment before she began to type, giving voice to what she sensed was the truth at the heart of the story. Thomas stood at the cliff's edge, watching her car disappear down the coastal road. The choice before him wasn't between duty and desire. It was between a half-life of regret and the courage to claim his one chance at joy. Some prices were too high, even for family loyalty. Some loves came once in a lifetime. He turned from the cliff, already knowing what he would do. The consequences would come as they always did. But he would face them with Elaine or not at all. She stopped typing, suddenly aware of Callan standing directly behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, hear the slight catch in his breathing. "Yes," he said softly. "That's it exactly." Aurelia turned in the chair to face him, their eyes meeting in the soft lamplight. The air between them seemed charged, heavy with unspoken words. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because it's what I would do," she answered honestly. "Choose love, even knowing it might end in heartbreak." Callan reached out slowly, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face with exquisite gentleness. "Aurelia!" Her name on his lips was both question and answer. She rose from the chair, eliminating the last distance between them. For a heartbeat, they stood suspended in possibility, in the fragile moment before a line is crossed. Then his hand cradled her cheek, and she leaned into his touch, and the line disappeared beneath them. The kiss began softly, tentative, questioning, but quickly deepened into something urgent and honest. His arms encircled her, drawing her against him as if she might vanish if he didn't hold tight enough. Her hands found the solid warmth of his chest, then moved upward to trace the strong line of his jaw, the soft texture of his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Callan rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if in prayer or pain. "We shouldn't," he whispered, even as his hands remained at her waist, unwilling to let go. "I know," she agreed, making no move to step away. Whatever was happening between them, this recognition that defied logic and propriety, felt inevitable, like gravity or tide. A force of nature neither could resist, even knowing the storm it might bring. The kiss changed everything and nothing. They continued working on both the renovation and the manuscript, maintaining a careful distance when Elowen was present. But in the moments they found themselves alone, the pretense fell away, replaced by an intimacy that grew more profound with each passing day. They didn't speak of what was happening, this connection that seemed to exist outside of rational explanation. Instead, they allowed it to unfold naturally, neither pushing nor retreating. A week after the kiss, Aurelia found herself in the estate's attic storage, searching for period-appropriate fixtures for the newly renovated spaces. Callan had mentioned trunks of items from previous generations that might yield the authentic touches she was looking for. The attic was well organized but vast, with labeled sections containing everything from holiday decorations to family heirlooms. Aurelia moved methodically through the household section, opening trunks and examining their contents. In the third trunk, beneath carefully wrapped crystal candlesticks, her hand brushed against something unexpected. A small wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Something about it triggered a flash of recognition, though she was certain she'd never seen it before. Curious, she lifted it from the trunk, noting its surprising weight. No lock secured it, just a simple brass latch that opened with gentle pressure. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, lay an assortment of jewelry. Not particularly valuable pieces, but personal ones. A silver charm bracelet. A pair of pearl earrings. A delicate watch with a cracked face. As she lifted the watch, something shifted beneath the velvet lining. A hidden compartment. Aurelia carefully removed the lining to reveal several folded papers and a small envelope. Her breath caught as she unfolded the top paper. Her mother's handwriting filled the page, the distinctive slant and flowing script unmistakable. It was dated June 1992, nearly 33 years ago. I dreamt of the coast again last night. Of the cliffs and the hidden cove where we used to meet. Sometimes I think I can still feel the sand between my toes, still taste the salt on your skin. They say time heals all wounds, but some cuts go too deep for healing. They become part of you, changing how you move through the world forever after. Aurelia's hands trembled as she realized what she was reading. Her mother's private journal entries. She should stop, return them to their hiding place. Yet something compelled her to continue. Some instinct that whispered these words held keys to questions she hadn't known to ask. The next entry, dated a month later. I saw his name in the paper today. Engaged to the shipping heiress. Just as his father always wanted. I should feel nothing. It's been nearly a year since that final night. Yet the pain was as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. How long does it take for a heart to understand what the mind already knows? That some loves, no matter how real, are never meant to last. With growing certainty, Aurelia knew who he must be. The timing, the references to the coast, the similarities to the manuscript story. It all pointed to one impossible conclusion. Her mother and Callan had once been lovers. With shaking hands, Aurelia reached for the small envelope hidden beneath the journal pages. Unlike the loose papers, this was addressed. Callan Dorne, written in her mother's elegant script. The envelope was sealed, never sent. For long moments, she stared at it, torn between respect for her mother's privacy and the desperate need to understand. In the end, the need won out. Carefully, she broke the seal, unfolding the single page inside. Callan, by the time you read this, if you ever do, everything will have changed. I'm leaving Seabrook tomorrow. I can't stay, not with the whispers and your father's threats. Not with the knowledge that you chose your family's legacy over what we shared. I don't write to change your mind. That door closed the night you told me you were honoring the engagement. I write because there's something you deserve to know. Something I've kept from you these past months as I've watched your life continue without me. She has your eyes. If she ever finds her way to you, love her better than we were allowed to love each other. I won't name her here. This letter may never reach you, and some truths are too dangerous to commit to paper. But know that a piece of you lives on, even if we could not. I release you from any obligation. She will have my name, my love, and a life far from the complications of yours. This is my final gift to you both. Always Solène. The letter slipped from Aurelia's fingers, floating to the attic floor as the truth crashed over her in devastating waves. The implications were unmistakable, impossible, and yet suddenly blindingly clear. Callan Dorne wasn't just her best friend's father. He might be her father too. The room seemed to tilt around her as fragments of memory rearranged themselves into a new picture. Her mother's inexplicable sadness when Aurelia would mention visiting the Dornes, the way she would sometimes study Aurelia's face with a strange mixture of love and pain, the locket with the forget-me-not that mirrored the one in Callan's manuscript. And her eyes. Everyone had always commented on her unusual eyes. A distinctive shade of gray-blue that matched neither her mother's warm brown nor her supposed father's hazel. But they matched Callan's perfectly. Aurelia pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling the sound that threatened to escape. Not quite a cry, not quite a laugh, but something broken between the two. The manuscript, the renovation, the growing connection between them. All of it took on a horrifying new dimension. She gathered the papers with trembling hands, returning them to the jewelry box. Her mind racing with impossible questions. Did Callan know? Had he recognized something in her from the beginning? Was that why he'd invited her to stay, to work on the renovation? Or was he as blind to the truth as she had been? The attic suddenly felt airless, the weight of decades-old secrets pressing down on her. She needed to think, to breathe, to understand what this meant. Not just for her but for all of them. With the letter clutched in her hand, Aurelia descended the attic stairs, each step carrying her closer to a confrontation that would change everything. Aurelia found Callan in the library, silhouetted against the twilight sky beyond the windows. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, a smile forming that quickly faded when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, moving toward her with concern. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe past the tightness in her chest. Instead, she extended her hand, the letter trembling between her fingers. Callan took it, confusion evident in his furrowed brow. Recognition dawned as he saw the handwriting on the envelope. His name in Solen's distinctive script. His eyes lifted to Aurelia's, a question in them. "I found it in the attic," she managed, her voice barely audible. "In a jewelry box hidden in one of the storage trunks." He stared at the sealed envelope, running his thumb across his name as if touching a relic. "You opened it." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." For a long moment, he stood motionless, the unopened letter in his hands like a live grenade. Then, with deliberate care, he moved to his desk, setting it down on the polished surface. "You should read it," Aurelia said, remaining by the door, needing the distance. "It changes everything." Callan's gaze returned to her face, studying her with an intensity that made her wonder if he already knew, if he had always known. Slowly, he broke the seal and unfolded the single page. Aurelia watched as he read, tracking the emotions that crossed his face in rapid succession. Confusion, shock, disbelief, and finally, a devastating realization that seemed to physically stagger him. He gripped the edge of the desk for support, the letter clutched in his other hand. "When?" he asked hoarsely, not looking up. "When were you born?" "April 15th, 1993. The date hung between them, its significance unmistakable. Callan closed his eyes, a visible shudder passing through him. 9 months after that last summer. He looked up then, his gaze moving over her features with new awareness, seeing not just the woman who had been working alongside him, but the daughter he never knew he had. "Did you know?" Aurelia asked, the question that had been burning inside her since she'd read the letter. "When you invited me to stay, to work with you, did you suspect?" "No." The word emerged broken, raw with truth. "God, no. I would never have." He couldn't finish, the implications too painful to voice. A kiss. The growing feelings between them. The boundary they had been dancing toward crossing. Callan sank into his chair, the letter still clutched in his hand. "All these years," he whispered. "She never told me. Never gave me the chance to." "To what?" Aurelia asked, her own emotions a storm she could barely contain. "To claim me. To be my father. You chose your family's expectations over her." The letter makes that clear. Pain flashed across his features. "It wasn't that simple." "It never is," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But choices have consequences. Hers was to keep this secret. Yours was to let her go. And now," Callan looked up at her, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of regret. "What happens now?" They moved to the sitting area, maintaining careful distance on opposite couches. The letter lay on the table between them, physical evidence of a truth neither had imagined possible. "I need to understand," Aurelia said, struggling to reconcile the man before her with this new reality. "The manuscript, Thomas and Elaine, that was you and my mother?" Callan nodded, his composure gradually returning though his eyes remained haunted. "We met when I came home from graduate school that summer. She was working at the local gallery, living in a small cottage near the beach. I'd never met anyone like her, so alive, so unbound by convention. But you were already promised to someone else?" "Not officially," But my father had made it clear since childhood that I was expected to marry Marianne Westfield. Our families had adjacent shipping empires. The merger through marriage had been planned for generations. His voice carried no self-pity, only a weary acceptance. I told myself it didn't matter, that Solène and I were just a summer affair. But it became more. Everything. The word emerged soft but certain. By August, I knew I couldn't go through with the engagement. I told my father I was breaking it off. Aurelia leaned forward. What happened? Callan's expression darkened. He threatened to destroy her. He had evidence, manufactured but convincing, that could have implicated her in art fraud at the gallery. Criminal charges, public humiliation. He ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. I was young, terrified. I believed him. So you chose protection over love. I chose what I thought was the only way to keep her safe. Regret shadowed his features. I told her it was over, that I was honoring my family's expectations. I never told her about my father's threats. I thought a clean break would be kinder. And she left town. Within days. I heard she'd moved to Arizona. By then, the engagement announcement had run in all the papers. 3 months later, I married Marianne. He looked down at his hands. She was a good woman. We built a life together. Had Elowen. Found companionship, if not the kind of love I'd known with Solène. Aurelia absorbed this, trying to align the timeline with what she knew of her own history. My mother never spoke of you. She told me my father was a graduate student she'd met in Seabrook, James Harlow. He left before I was born, wanted no part of fatherhood. James Harlow was my roommate that summer, Callan said quietly. He moved to Europe that fall. She must have used his name to create a plausible story. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture Aurelia had never imagined. All these years, I believed in a father who never existed, while my real father was here. Callan finished, the word heavy with implication. If I had known, would it have changed anything? Aurelia interrupted, needing honesty more than comfort. Would you have left your wife, your life, for a child you never planned? The question hung between them, impossible to answer with certainty. Callan met her gaze directly. I don't know. I want to believe I would have found a way to be part of your life. But claiming that now, with the safety of 30 years' distance. He shook his head. I won't insult you with convenient retroactive courage. His honesty, painful as it was, gave Aurelia something solid to stand on amid the shifting sands of her identity. The DNA test will confirm it, she said, thinking practically now. But I don't need science to tell me what I can see with my own eyes. Callan nodded, his gaze moving over her features with wonder and grief intermingled. Your eyes, your expressions, even the way you tilt your head when you're considering a problem. It's like looking in a mirror across time. And the connection we felt, Aurelia added softly. The immediate recognition. It wasn't. She couldn't finish, the implication too painful to voice. No, Callan said firmly, understanding what she couldn't say. It wasn't that. It was blood recognizing blood. Family finding family, even when the conscious mind didn't know. The relief that flooded through her was immediate and profound. What had been building between them, the attraction, the chemistry, had been something else entirely. A biological recognition, a genetic echo, not the forbidden desire they had both feared and welcomed. What do we do now? She asked, the question encompassing a universe of complications. Before Callan could answer, the library door swung open. Elowen stood in the doorway, her expression shifting from casual curiosity to concern as she registered the tension in the room. What's going on? She asked, moving further into the library. You both look like you've seen a ghost. Aurelia and Callan exchanged a glance, a lifetime of secrets hanging in the balance. It was Callan who finally spoke. Elowen, please sit down. There's something we need to tell you. Wariness crept into Elowen's features as she perched on the edge of a chair. If this is about whatever's been happening between you two, I already know. I'm not blind. It's not that, Aurelia said quickly. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it, Elowen replied, an edge entering her voice. Because the tension in this room is suffocating. Callan reached for the letter on the table, holding it for a moment before extending it to his daughter. This was written by Solène, Aurelia's mother, 33 years ago. I never received it until today. Elowen took the letter with visible reluctance, her eyes moving rapidly over the words. Confusion gave way to shock, then a dawning horror as understanding took hold. She has your eyes, Elowen read aloud, her voice barely audible. She looked up sharply, gaze darting between Callan and Aurelia. This is saying, this means. We believe I'm Callan's biological daughter, Aurelia confirmed, the words still strange on her tongue. Elowen stood abruptly, the letter falling from her fingers. Well, that's not possible. Dad would have known. He would have told me. I didn't know, Callan said gently. Solène never told me she was pregnant when she left Seabrook. So what? You and Aurelia's mother had some secret affair. While you were engaged to Mom. Anger flashed in Elowen's eyes, directed entirely at her father. Was anything about our family real? Elowen, please. And you too, she continued, gesturing between them, her voice rising. All these late nights, the private conversations, the way you look at each other. She stopped suddenly, realization dawning. Oh God, you didn't know either, did you? You've been, what? Falling for each other without realizing you're father and daughter. The raw truth of it, spoken aloud, landed like a physical blow. Aurelia flinched, unable to deny what had been building between them before the letter's discovery. Nothing happened, Callan said firmly, though the flush creeping up his neck betrayed the partial lie. Elowen's laugh was brittle, edged with hysteria. Nothing. The entire household staff has been gossiping about the tension between you two. I've watched you orbit each other like binary stars for weeks. Her gaze fixed on Aurelia, hurt and betrayal evident. You're supposed to be my best friend. How could you? I didn't know, Aurelia said, rising to face her. I would never have. Save it. Elowen cut her off, turning back to her father. So I have a secret half-sister. Anything else you've been hiding for 30 years? Any other children scattered across the country? That's enough, Callan said, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. Your anger is justified, but directing it at Aurelia solves nothing. If you want to blame someone, blame me. I made the choices that set this in motion. Gladly, Elowen shot back. You've been living a lie my entire life. Did you ever love Mom? Or was she just the convenient choice after your true love left town? Pain flashed across Callan's features. I loved your mother, Elowen. Differently than Solène, but genuinely. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real. Real. Elowen's voice cracked. Was it real when you retreated into your writing after she died? When you barely acknowledged my existence for years? When you turned this house into a mausoleum to your grief? Each question landed like a physical blow. Callan seemed to age before their eyes, the weight of decades of unspoken truths pressing down on him. You're right, he said quietly. I failed you after Marianne died. I failed you in ways I can never fully repair. But that had nothing to do with Solène and everything to do with my own inability to face pain. Convenient explanation, Elowen said bitterly. She turned to Aurelia, hurt radiating from her. And you? Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you two planning to keep this secret between yourselves? We just found out, Aurelia said, reaching for her friend's hand, which Elowen promptly withdrew. The letter was hidden in the attic. I only discovered it hours ago. So what happens now? Elowen demanded, looking between them. We all pretend to be one big happy family. Act like this doesn't change everything. It does change everything, Callan acknowledged. But how it changes things is up to us. All of us. Elowen shook her head, tears finally breaking free. Do you have any idea what this feels like? To discover your entire life has been built on lies. That the friend you trusted has been. She stopped, unable to finish. I never meant to hurt you, Aurelia said softly. Either as your friend or as whatever I am now. My half-sister, Elowen supplied, the words emerging strangled. The daughter he never knew he had. The one who shares his blood, his eyes, his creative instincts. Fresh pain flashed across her features. No wonder you two connected so quickly. You're literally made from the same DNA. The observation hung in the air, undeniable in its truth. The connection that had drawn Aurelia and Callan together from the beginning hadn't been inappropriate attraction but biological recognition, a truth that should have been comforting but somehow only added to the pain of the moment. I need to go, Elowen said suddenly, backing toward the door. I can't be in this room with you two right now. I can't even think straight. Elowen, please, Callan started, moving toward her. Don't. She held up a hand, stopping him. Just don't. I need time. With that, she turned and fled, her footsteps echoing down the hallway, followed by the distant slam of the front door. Aurelia and Callan stood in silence, the wreckage of 3 lives scattered around them like debris after a storm. My dear heart, wherever you are right now, I hope you're breathing deeply. Have you ever stood at the crossroads of truth and happiness? Faced a moment when honesty might destroy everything you've built? If this story has moved something within you, please subscribe to the Chapters of Love and share it with someone who understands that love is rarely simple. I'm reading every comment. Tell me, would you choose painful truth or comforting silence? From my soul to yours, may you always find the courage to face your truths, even when they break your heart. The house fell silent in Elowen's absence, a heavy stillness that seemed to absorb all sound. Aurelia retreated to the blue room, packing her belongings with mechanical precision. Callan disappeared into his study, the door firmly closed. By morning, Elowen had not returned. Her text to Aurelia was brief. Staying with friends in Portland. Need space. Don't follow. Aurelia left her own note on the kitchen counter. Simple words that couldn't begin to address the complexity of what had happened. I'm going to my apartment in the city. When you're ready to talk, I'll be there. Both of you. As she drove away from the Dorne estate, the coastal road stretching before her, Aurelia felt the weight of 3 decades of secrets pressing down on her. The father she'd never known. The friend she might have lost. The life she'd believed was hers, now revealed as an elaborate fiction. The truth had indeed set them free, but into a wilderness none of them knew how to navigate. 3 weeks passed in a blur of DNA tests, sleepless nights, and unanswered questions. Aurelia's small city apartment became both sanctuary and prison as she grappled with her shattered identity. The test results, delivered via clinical email, only confirmed what her heart had already known. Callan Dorne was her biological father. She spent hours studying old photographs of her mother, searching for clues she'd missed. The sadness that sometimes shadowed Solenne's smile, the way she would change the subject whenever the Dornes were mentioned. Her reluctance to visit Seabrook after Aurelia turned 18. The signs had always been there, hidden in plain sight. In quiet moments, Aurelia found herself touching her own features in the mirror. The eyes that were unmistakably Callan's, the expressions she'd inherited without knowing their source. 32 years of believing she was one person, only to discover she was someone else entirely. Yet as days passed, an unexpected peace began to settle within her. The revelation explained so much: her natural affinity for writing that had complemented her design work, her instinctive understanding of spatial relationships, even the inexplicable sense of homecoming she'd felt upon returning to Seabrook. Parts of herself that had seemed random now revealed themselves as inheritance. Across town, in a hotel suite he'd taken after finding the empty house unbearable, Callan immersed himself in revising his manuscript. The story of Thomas and Elaine transformed beneath his fingers, no longer a tale of lost love, but one of redemption across time. The fictional Thomas did what Callan had not. Fought for his love, claimed his child, built a life based on truth rather than expectation. Writing became both penance and healing, a way to explore the choices he wished he'd made while acknowledging the irreversibility of the past. Between chapters, he researched trust funds, inheritance laws, and how to legally recognize a child discovered in adulthood. Practical matters that couldn't erase 32 years of absence but might forge a path forward. Elowen moved between friends' guest rooms, unable to settle, her anger gradually giving way to a more complex grief. The father she'd known, distant but dependable, flawed but fundamentally good, remained the same man, yet everything surrounding him had changed. The mother she'd adored had unknowingly raised her in the shadow of her husband's first love. And the friend she'd trusted implicitly was now her sister, a connection that should have brought joy but instead felt like another loss. Yet as her initial shock faded, Elowen found herself remembering moments from the past 3 weeks. How alive her father had seemed while working with Aurelia, how his eyes had regained their light. For the first time since her mother's death, he had emerged from his grief, reaching toward life instead of merely enduring it. Perhaps, she reluctantly admitted to herself, some truths were worth the pain they caused. They met on neutral ground, a private room in a coastal restaurant midway between Seabrook and Portland. Autumn rain lashed the windows, the gray sky mirroring the uncertainty each brought to the table. Aurelia arrived first, then Callan, and finally Elowen, each carrying the weight of the past weeks in the shadows beneath their eyes. For several moments, no one spoke, the only sound the distant murmur of other diners and the persistent rhythm of rain. "Thank you both for coming," Callan finally said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I know this isn't easy." "Nothing about this is easy," Elowen replied, though the edge had gone from her voice, replaced by exhaustion. "But we can't avoid each other forever. Not in a town this size." Aurelia studied her friend, her sister, noting the familiar stubborn set of her jaw, the protective armor she'd always donned when feeling vulnerable. "I've missed you," she said simply. Something flickered in Elowen's expression, a softening quickly masked. "I'm still angry," she admitted. "Not just about the situation but about being the last to know. About watching you two form a connection that excluded me, even if neither of you understood what it was." "You have every right to your anger," Callan acknowledged. "I've failed you in more ways than I can count. Failed both of you." His gaze moved between them, these daughters who shared his blood but such different experiences of him. "I can't change the past. But I can try to build something better going forward, if you'll allow it." "What does that even look like?" Elowen asked, the question directed at both of them. "I don't know," Aurelia admitted. "I'm still trying to reconcile who I thought I was with who I actually am. But I do know that losing you as my friend isn't something I'm willing to accept, even if it takes time to figure out what being sisters means." "And you?" Elowen turned to her father. "What do you want from this mess you created?" Callan met her gaze directly. "A chance to be the father you both deserve. Different relationships, obviously. 32 years can't be erased or replicated. But authentic ones, based on truth rather than convenience or obligation." The honesty in his voice reached something in both women. Elowen's shoulders relaxed slightly, while Aurelia found herself blinking back unexpected tears. "I'm willing to try," Elowen said finally. "Not for your sake but for mine. And for Mom's. She would have wanted me to find a way forward." "And you?" Callan asked Aurelia, vulnerability evident in his question. She considered carefully before answering. "I spent my whole life wondering about a father who never existed. I'm not going to waste another moment when the real one is sitting across from me." Something shifted in the atmosphere then. Not resolution exactly but possibility. The beginning of a path that acknowledged the pain of the past while refusing to be defined by it. As they began to talk, haltingly at first, then with growing ease, the rain outside gradually subsided, thin shafts of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Not an ending but a clearing. A chance to see each other clearly at last. The truth about our origins shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. We are more than the secrets kept by those who came before, more than the choices made in moments of fear or weakness decades before we drew breath. What matters isn't the perfect narrative we construct about our lives, but our willingness to revise that story when truth demands it. To stand in the harsh light of revelation and still choose connection over comfort, authenticity over illusion. Some wounds can never fully heal. Some absences can never be filled. But in acknowledging them honestly, we create space for something new to grow. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a different kind of beauty, rooted in truth rather than wishful thinking. Perhaps that's the most profound legacy we can leave. Not perfection, but the courage to face our mistakes and begin again. To show those we love that redemption isn't found in flawlessness, but in the humble, persistent effort to live more truthfully today than we did yesterday. After all, the most powerful stories aren't those where nothing goes wrong, but those where everything does. And still, somehow, love finds a way forward. My beautiful souls, wherever you are in this moment, perhaps with tears still fresh on your cheeks or a hand pressed against your heart, I hope this story has touched something real within you. Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything you thought you knew? Or found family in places you never expected to look? If this journey of truth, pain, and healing has resonated with you, please subscribe to the Chapters of Love and share it with someone whose heart speaks the same language as yours. I read every comment. Tell me about a time when painful honesty opened the door to deeper connection in your life. From my heart to yours, may you always have the courage to choose truth over comfort, and may you find, as Aurelia did, that our stories are never truly finished, just waiting for the next chapter to begin. Until next time, stay tender with yourself and those you love. You are seen, you are heard, and your story matters.